Welcome to Mental Health for Creative Minds, where we explore the intersection of mental health and the creative industry. I'm your host, Jessica McGann, TV producer, coach to creative professionals, and passionate advocate for mental health resources for the film and theater communities. As creative professionals, we often find ourselves working on projects that may not always fully ignite our souls, be it supporting someone else's vision or creating something like an ad or commercial over and over and over. These gigs, while often necessary for our financial stability, can sometimes leave us feeling creatively unsatisfied and disconnected from our true artistic desires. And that is precisely why today I'm thrilled to be chatting with Caroline Aylward, a filmmaker, podcaster, and storyteller who has masterfully used her experience as a producer and creator herself to help other creative entrepreneurs launch authentic and profitable podcasts, connecting them with their own unique voice and a worldwide audience. In this episode, Caroline takes us through her journey from film production to podcasting. She explains why podcasting is not just a powerful outlet for creative expression, but also an effective strategy for building a sustainable business. As a creative professional, understanding this balance may just be the thing that you have been searching for. It's about finding new ways to channel your creativity without sacrificing your mental health or financial stability. Whether you're looking to amplify your voice, connect more deeply with an audience, or even monetize your creative passions, this discussion is tailored to help you achieve these goals. Let's learn how you can turn your creative impulses into actionable, rewarding projects. Let's dive in. Caroline, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the Mental Health for Creative Minds podcast today. Welcome. How are you feeling as you come into today's conversation?
I'm feeling good. I just got out of the sauna. And so I'm
Oh,
feeling like I just sweat some things out and I'm excited. I mean, mental health for creatives, like mental health in general, these topics are yes, they're yes.
well, I have been following your work for about a year or so now. So personally, I am just genuinely really excited to have you here, and I'm excited to learn from you, and I'm excited for my audience to get to know you and familiar with your work. And so maybe before we dive into like the heart of the conversation today, you could share a little bit about your personal journey into podcasting.
So I am a filmmaker and was working in production and at a production company. And kind of long story short, I ended up writing for this digital magazine based in New York that was focused on interviewing artists about what they do and why they do it. It wasn't a podcast, it was just a digital publication. And so I had the best time finding artists in New York City and going and sitting down and chatting with them and interviewing them. And I started to record the conversations because I wanted to be present for them. And I had like originally just taken notes during the conversation. I'm like writing it down like old school. And I was like, wow, this is just, I'm missing things here. So I started recording them and then realized I had these beautiful conversations recorded. And then podcasting was existed. This was probably in like 2014. Existed for sure, but it was not at all the beautiful space that it is now. That's just abundant, like podcasts everywhere. And so I was like, podcast didn't even strike my mind to like turn it into a podcast. And one day I was on the train from Boston to New York because I was living in Boston at the time. And my sister was like, you should start one of those podcasts. And I was like, what? Like, how do you even do that? And so I had, simultaneously with that, really started my spiritual practice and my yoga practice and teaching yoga and meditation and dealing with my own mental health and anxiety. And so these two things were happening in conjunction. And so I launched my first podcast, the Get a Helmet podcast, when I was living with my grandpa in Boston. And I just bought a microphone from Amazon and started recording solo episodes and interviews and guided meditations and having conversations about spirituality and wellness and entrepreneurship. I did not have a business at the time. I had no plan to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even know how to spell entrepreneurship. And honestly, like sometimes I still mess it up. It's like no plan to be a business owner. And the Get a Helmet podcast was what started it all for me. People started following me on social media, listening to the podcast, noticing me in Boston, like you're the Get a Helmet podcast, and like started hosting live events and just learning everything that there was to know about having this platform to share your voice. And it built this beautiful community. I started creating offers and coaching, and one thing led to another. So it's really been an interesting journey with like just following what felt good. And, throughout that entire time, I watched the podcast industry explode. I, took courses on it, and now I have my own course and help women launch their own podcasts. And so it's just been this interesting kind of intuitive following.
It sounds like it's something that like served as a personal creative outlet to you, and that your skills just like fully aligned for this to kind of fluidly fall into your life.
Exactly. We're working in film and video production. I was an editor and just, dealing with all kinds of storytelling pieces. And so the podcasting was like, okay, well, that's eliminating the visuals. I mean, nowadays people are including the video a lot, but at the time I was like, I can edit some sound together, like no problem. But yes, it was very much a creative outlet in the sense of I felt so excited to have these conversations, to share my voice, to inspire other people, even if it were one person who listened and said, that helped me make it through my day. It was a very mental health focused podcast. And, back then my work was very focused in mental health and anxiety support and helping women in their relationship with their bodies. I made films about it. So, it's been a wild kind of road, but it was such a creative outlet. It still is. It still is.
What was the concept behind Get a Helmet podcast? Like, what if someone were to go to that podcast, what would they expect to learn or take away from it?
It is a supportive, grounding interview series about wellness and creativity and entrepreneurship. Just lots of really inspiring conversations, learning tools to help you feel more empowered and more kind of grounded in your mental health. So, Get a Helmet came from the phrase like life's tough, get a helmet. And my dad would always say that to me growing up. And so it just it evolved from like life's tough, get a helmet to just like get a helmet. And it became this phrase. And then I kind of reclaimed it into like having your helmets. Like, what are your helmets when you feel anxious or scared or fearful or doubtful, whether it's yoga or going for a hike or, so the Get a Helmet podcast is really kind of like showing people all these different helmets that you can put on in these moments of kind of suffering.
And I've listened to definitely a few episodes of that podcast, and it is really beautiful and informative. And I listened to your podcast a lot when I was preparing this podcast. Like when I did Pivot Point and when I moved to this, I really did gain a lot of insights and inspirations from your work. So you really are doing an amazing job. And what I'm hearing is that this was really an outlet for you that really flourished into something that you could create for yourself and help others with. And what I hear as a coach to creatives a lot of the time is that, we're passionate human beings, we're creative individuals, and we get into these work spaces and this industry because we're passionate, soul-filled human beings with ideas and expressions that we want to put out there. But the reality of the world is sometimes you have to do other people's passion projects. You have to do the herpes commercial. You have to grind for a mayonnaise TV show or whatever, something stupid, and we can get creatively drained and creatively lost. And I hear creatives coming to me just wanting to give up because they just feel almost burnt out in a way. And I'm wondering if you think that podcasting can help creatives in these film and theater industries be an outlet to express themselves. And if so, how does that work?
Absolutely. I mean, my most recent podcast, The Creative Visionary, is really a space to inspire creativity. Like, yes, I'm coaching on podcasting there, but it is this wild journey, the creative process, right? We've seen those illustrations and those memes that it's like, yay, great idea. And then it's like, this sucks. And then it's like, that classic thing. It happens every time. It's inevitable. And when you do this enough, then every time you feel those kind of doubts and fears and I'm not enough and imposter syndromes, inevitably you were like, there's that voice again. It becomes a little bit more familiar versus like, I'm going to use this as like, okay, stop sign. But for me and for a lot of my clients, podcasting helps refine your authentic voice, or that you turn your microphone on and just shout from the rooftops who you are, what you do, and how you help people and what art you make, the more confident you feel in doing it. And then, like, so many people, when we first get started, like in my podcast course, Spoken, everyone's like, what am I going to talk about? My voice sounds weird, all these kind of and I'm just like, please go back and listen to my first podcast episodes. You can hear lawnmowers going off in the background. Like, it's like just a mess, but I put it out there because taking that imperfect, messy action, which we always hear, is the only way to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And as I kept going, what carved out of this kind of like piece of marble that was my podcast was my business, was my art. I had no intention of creating a business, like I said, but as I kept having these conversations, it was like, ooh, this is what's really lighting me up. Okay, that avenue. Okay, let's go here and let's talk to that person. And it was such just a consistent inspiration. And I think that staying inspired as a creative and giving yourself that time to tap into that kind of creative frequency and like just dream is such an important practice. And it gets like bypassed a lot, especially in this world of like create content. It's like, okay, well, yes. And also, when have I just like let myself journal or paint or write or sing or whatever it is and just like notice what's inspiring me? And I feel like the podcasting space is a beautiful way to feel those like seeds of inspiration.
Yeah, I feel like I'm exactly on that path that you just described, because I believe that you are a few years ahead of me in terms of business and podcasting. Like, I think you have a few years on me, and I feel that within myself. Like, I'm getting, as I continue down this path, as I continue to work on my podcast, like that's why I transcended this podcast into this one from Pivot Point, because I just, through this work, became more clear on my message. I gained insights from risking sucking on that first one and just diving in and trying and hating the sound of my voice and cringing at putting it out there and being like, do you guys want to listen to this podcast thing that I made, that I birthed, that like maybe you want to listen to? It's truly terrifying and scary, but so rewarding. And I feel like I understand maybe a little bit of where that, like, you kind of fine tune your voice, because you kind of have to give a shit about what you're talking about, because it's so much work. It's, at the end of the day, so much work to create what we're creating, that you need to have heart and soul and passion behind it. And you get really clear on what that passion is, because it's the fuel to what's happening in this space.
Yes. Yes. And I think like one of the biggest things that often goes kind of unnoticed in the podcast coaching space is like helping you, whoever you are wanting to start a podcast, really understand that. Like, what are you here to do? Who are you here to serve? What art do you make? How does it help people? And this is where like people's messaging in their business gets really muddy and murky and like lost, especially in this creative space, because we're like multi-passionate. It's like, which is 100% me. But there's something so fierce and intentional about clarity and confidence in exactly what you're here to do. And that's a big part of what we do in Spoken. And yes, all the technical pieces and creative pieces of podcasting, but also what's the goal here? So yeah.
So for anyone who is listening to us right now talk about how much we love our podcast and how much it's changed our personal creative lives, from your personal insights, what would you say are the first steps to getting started?
So I actually have a workbook called the Launch Your Authentic as Fuck workbook. It's super helpful because it asks these more general questions to help you start to kind of chip away at what is this and where do I begin and what do I want to say and what makes you like, what lights you up most about launching a podcast is one of the questions, right? What podcasts are you listening to right now? Why do you listen to them? What do you get out of them? What do you like about them? What do you not like about them? And if you're not really a podcast listener, like maybe start poking around, like see what you like, see what you don't like. And, say you're a photographer. go poke around and see what other photography podcasts exist, gain some inspiration, see what their cover art looks like, see what people are up to, notice what categories that they're putting themselves in. And then we start to really chisel away at these questions about your business. Like, especially if you're launching a podcast to turn it into a funnel into your business to get more paying clients, then your podcast is a great opportunity to talk about how you will help them, how you've already helped other people, how your offers and services will change their life. Here's one step they can take to get closer to their goal. What is their goal? Right. So just really dialing in on the messaging. What ends up happening with the podcast is like it just breeds clarity in your business as a whole. Because if you're going to make this thing, like you were saying, like put in this work and this passion, let's get really clear on how it can serve you and who you're talking to and be really intentional about that. And then, once you start to just get the wheels turning, it all seems so much more attainable. And then you can get into the like production stuff and the creative fun stuff, like the cover art and the music. But this workbook really breaks it down. And then the entire guide walks you through checklist step by step of exactly where to begin. So it's a great place if you're like, where the hell do I even start?
What would you say some of the common challenges are that people come up against when they're first trying to launch a podcast?
Honestly, the biggest one that I see a lot is people doubting themselves. Yeah, it's wild to me.
Thing I hear most of the time is like, it's overly saturated. Everyone has a podcast.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
why
yeah.
bother? Why would I dare bother? There's
Yeah.
too many people.
It's also so funny to me because like every industry is saturated. How many there are like millions of book authors. Are people going to stop writing books?
I was just thinking that exact same, or like TV shows. Should we just stop making those? Because you can watch reruns, right?
I know, like it's just to me that's a cop out. To me that's like the imposter syndrome in disguise because what's underneath that is the fear that no one's going to listen. When you can really educate yourself on the strategy to get people to listen and you can feel really confident in the work and really supported in making your podcast, that fear melts away. You're watching other people all around you do it. You're being guided in exactly how to do it. But yeah, it's really like, oh, but I'm going to run out of ideas of what to talk about. I'm like, have you ever been in a conversation with a person and just like stopped talking? Like, no, like if you're out in the world living your life and having experiences and serving clients and making art, there's just like infinite things to share and talk about. That's just how life works. So it's just, again, another fear kind of underneath the surface of no one's going to listen, no one's going to like it.
Those are totally fears that I had immediately.
Yeah.
There's still fears that I have. Every time I record, every time I post, I'm like, this is the one that's going to have 0 listens to it. And I'm going to be scratching my head as to why. Or,
Yep. Oh yeah. What the big thing for me was I would do an interview with somebody and I would finish the interview and I would think, that didn't really land, did it? And then I would go back and I'd listen to it and I'd be like, wait a second, this is fantastic. Like, you kind of like in the moment, again, that kind of creative process up and down. When you feel the doubt, just kind of like laugh at it. Like it's going to happen. How can you support yourself in those ups and downs, which come with creativity and they come with being a business owner?
yes, being comfortable with sitting in the discomfort because it's not always going to feel good and it's going to take a lot of discipline. And it's a part of the process.
It is.
One thing I notice a lot through your work is how much of an emphasis you put on storytelling and the ability to properly tell stories. And you come from a visual background, such as film and TV, like a lot of the listeners, along with our theater creatives. So that's mainly a visual medium that includes storytelling. How much does the storytelling change when we take away the visual aspects? And is there something more you have to consider when you're telling stories with just your voice?
Such a good question. I feel so impacted by sound. And obviously, so we all do, right? Like music is just this universal language and sound. And so to me, I feel like there's such a rich opportunity with just your voice and the frequency of your voice or, laying in some music and portraying a vibe. I think that there's something to be said for when you see it, you can really feel when you see someone's body language, and because you're listening to a podcast and you're like, she just paused. You can't see that I'm going like that. You know what I mean? Like there's some kind of visual cues missing, but it almost calls for a deeper attention from the listener. There's an intimacy with like hearing you talk in your someone else talking in your AirPods and like going for your walk. And to me, it feels a little bit more personal. The podcasting kind of sound space does. Obviously, as a filmmaker, like you can't beat like the entire visual, like just landscape of like seeing people's body language and seeing things unfold and hearing things in music. It's everything together, right? But such an opportunity that's easier for you to produce and easier for someone to consume through podcasting. To me, it's the same structure. It's the same, like, let's jump in with a little bit of a cliffhanger of something that juicy that was said, and like open up your episode with a little quote from the episode, and then let your music play and come in with your intro and get some attention, and then get into the episode, get right into the juiciness of it, like hook people's attention, right? It's the same kind of rhythm of a visual story.
It almost sounds like a fun creative challenge. Like when you get so comfortable with telling a story using a certain kind of medium, can you try and challenge yourself to tell a similar story or the same story, but take away the element of visual? Like, how do you tell that story with just like when you even just change the tone of your voice, like things that we learn or I've learned as an actor to help tell the story, like you really leaning on those other skills and tools that maybe you've let go to the wayside with the craft that you are currently using. Like it kind of sounds like a fun creative challenge, to be honest with you.
That's a really good point. And I feel like for like, people, actors and people in theater and film listening, like, probably better than I know in terms of the intonation of your voice and really trusting that, like trusting this and taking on that challenge.
I plan on in this series having episodes where I share personal stories, and I this is already landing for me and how I want to take on that rather than it just being like, okay, I'm going to sit at the mic and I'm going to talk. I'm going to try and actually use some of those skills that I learned as an actor that you've just reminded me of to help tell those stories so that they land deeper for the listeners. So thank you. That's already connecting to me so much.
Good. That sounds so valuable. And something I talk about a lot is preparing your voice to be shared.
Yes.
We do vocal exercises, we do some somatic exercises, get up, dance, shake around, like, clear your energetic space, like prepare your voice for being shared and not, like just turn on your mic and just go through the motions and check off the box. It's like when you share your story, your voice, people are going to be listening to this. So call those people in, like really connect to their energy and feel your confidence and let your breath drop down into your belly. Like really be intentional about these things.
Now you help creatives make and monetize podcasts, correct? So what are some effective ways that you've seen or used podcasting to monetize creative content?
Let's start with the biggest misconception about podcasting in terms of monetization. And that is that the only way to monetize is with big brand sponsorships and paid ad space. Big podcasts like Rich Roll and,
Color Daddy.
Yeah, Color Daddy. It's like NARS Cosmetics. It's like, okay, well, little old me is not going to get NARS Cosmetics to pay me money. I mean, maybe someday, but not right now. So how do we monetize? So there's so many ways, right? Whatever field you're in, if you have a paid service, whether it's a one-on-one program or an online course or one-on-one sessions, whatever photography packages, sell them on your podcast. Sell them, talk about them, create ad spots about your own offers, sell your own stuff. It's so funny to me. I'm like, this is your show. Like take up space on it. And then there's a little bit of strategy with that in terms of like, if somebody's just getting started listening to your show and you're going to like drop your 5K, like high level mentorship on the podcast, like, sure, do that. But we want to also warm people up. It's the same mentality as selling in your email, offer free things to them, high value free things get them on your email list. So, a huge part of Spoken is really teaching you how to, if you don't already have one, build out a really powerful lead magnet and to create an ad spot on your podcast for your lead magnet so that anybody listening can download a free thing that you offer and become someone that is on your email list that you can continue to nurture on your email list and on your podcast. Because the goal here is to get them to really understand why they need what it is that you have. Why, and to really understand and know you and like you and trust you. That's the biggest power of podcasting, is that you're hanging out with somebody. Like they're really getting to know you and understand you. And you get to this point where it's like, man, if they were to sell anything to me, I'd probably buy it, because like I really just like trust, after listening to so many conversations. That's what got me, was listening to podcasts and then eventually just being like, I'm going to just buy this thing from them because I just trust what they're recommending to me, right? So there's this whole world and a lot more strategy behind leading people into your email list and then selling your offers directly on your podcast. And then on top of that, as a podcaster, I'm recommending headphones and microphones and webcams and soundproofing. And, I can have affiliate codes, right? As a photographer, as, a coach, what are the products, the softwares that you're using as a vocal coach? Like, what are you using? Get a code for that and create an ad spot for that. So you're starting to monetize those things on your podcast. So there's just like so many different ways to get creative with it.
It sounds like a beautiful tool to like build community around the things that actually light you up. And then by showing up in the thing that lights you up and talking about the things that you're passionate about, you attract those people who are likely also attracted to those passions. And then they can find and access your knowledge through like that's, it's what you said, it's a funnel into more of what you have to offer. Even if you're not selling, like if you're an actor, a performer, a director, and you just have art you want to get out into the world, if you have a podcast and you're talking, or you could just, even if you don't want to start a podcast, you could just go on other people's podcasts and talk about it if you don't want to. But it's a great way to attract people into and get eyes onto your art and your creation, or generate more money is what I'm hearing.
1,000%. There are a lot of people that come to me that are like, not really ready to launch my own podcast. Can you help me get on other podcasts? And there's so much strategy within that, which is so much fun. We dive into like really crafting the perfect podcast pitch and finding, the right shows to pitch to, and understanding what are those talking points that are unique, that are going to land, and just helping kind of consolidate all of that information. And then, yes, you go on these shows, you get in front of audiences, and then they just know it's brand awareness, it's art awareness, it's all of the things. So,
and you're getting in front of their audiences. It's not just posting to your same Instagram or Facebook or whatever. It's getting in front of new eyes. And that is just so hugely beneficial. And I will say that ever since I joined the podcast community, it is a very welcoming community. It is just so much love and welcoming, and everyone just wants to be on each other's podcasts. And it really does feel like such a welcoming environment. So if that is something that anyone listening is afraid of, like, please do not. There is just, I would say the communities on Facebook and online you can find are just really genuinely supportive.
I'm so glad to hear that reflection, and I could not agree more. It's like, it's a different energy than social media. It really is. And I teach this in Spoken, but it's like, go for it. Like, it's free marketing for somebody to be on your podcast. So go for it. I remember asking like these huge names to me, they're huge names, and them saying yes, and then getting pitches sent to me. I'm like, this person was on Dr. Oz and they want to be on my podcast. Like, sure, I'll have them. Like the most beautiful, expansive experience. And and for me, like, I can teach all now how to turn your podcast into a business funnel. But remember, for anybody listening, I didn't even have a business when I started my first podcast. I didn't. So my business was birthed from the conversations I had on my podcast. So wherever you are, even if, like you said, if you have no intention of starting a business, but the podcasting is really lighting you up, follow that.
How would you say that building an audience on podcasting, how does it differ from building an audience on, say, other platforms such as Instagram or YouTube, or is there even a difference?
This is a really good question. I think that there are, certain things to be focused on in terms of growth that are different across all three of those. And with podcasting, the the biggest thing, some of the biggest things that I've seen is consistently marketing it, to your email list, leveraging social media to be marketing it, not just on the days that your episodes go live, but all the time. Like really putting on the hat and the identity of a podcast host. So, for example, if I were to say, if you want to learn more about turning your podcast into a business funnel, go listen to the Creative Visionary Podcast, episode 7. I have an episode on this. Like, integrate this into your conversations.
That's smart. I don't do that. I am the person that markets only on the day the podcast goes live. It's because I find it hard. I think of it as a lot of work because then you have to like find the sound clips, and it is a lot of work, like advertising, but just like simple things like that. Just those simple drop-ins are something like I didn't even think about. But yeah, like something so simple you could do.
Always recommend like printing out a list of your episodes and just like keeping it at your desk. So whether you're coaching a client or you're on a podcast record or you're in some sort of a collaboration, like being like, oh yeah, actually like I have a whole episode about this. So, thinking like that. The other thing with the podcasting space is getting booked on other podcasts, like we were talking about, right? Then you're in the space and the arena of people who listen to podcasts. They're on the podcast platforms. The next big thing that I would say is the titles of your episodes, the searchability of the titles of your episodes.
Like SEO type of things?
Yeah. And thinking about like, okay, if I'm writing my episode on turning your podcast into a powerful business funnel, it's probably going to benefit me to put on like, if I were a person, help me make money, how to make money with my podcast is probably what someone would type into the search bar, right? So implementing those words into the episode title and being specific there and those keywords. Yeah, and SEO optimizing, which we do for our private clients, but if you're doing it on your own, just kind of do what I just did. If somebody were searching for this, what would they type into the Google search bar? And then implement those words into your episode title. So it's different from social media in the sense of social media content barely has a 24-hour lifespan. Like we're lucky if people even see our Instagram content at this point. With podcasting, people listen to them like as if it's a library. It is a library that exists forever. If I find a podcast that I like and I listen to one episode that really lands, I'm going to scroll through and see what else they've got going on from like a year ago. Somebody can type it into the search bar, something that they're looking for, and it'll pop up from years ago.
I'll save episodes too. Like if I really like it, if I learn something, I take away something, or it sparks something inside me, I'll save it and I'll go back to it.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The podcast that I listen to, I've definitely listened to episodes multiple times. But the way, people's brains work on podcast directories is similar to YouTube in the sense of it's a search engine. Instagram doesn't work that way. So it's just such an opportunity to get more people's ears and eyes on your work and your art.
I feel like I know the answer to this because you've spoken so eloquently and so passionately in this interview, but how has podcasting changed the professional trajectory of your life?
How has it not, honestly? Like it started my business. I had, like I said, no intention of being an entrepreneur. I was working in production. I was a producer in advertising, and it gave me a creative outlet. It gave me a platform to start making my art and to do it on my own. It just led me to so many opportunities. I was talking to people that I admired so deeply that I would never be able to talk to unless I had a platform that said, hey, want to come talk on my platform? They're like, yeah, sure. It changed everything. I mean, now, my podcast course is one of my biggest, offers that I have. And now I get to teach other people how to do that. And, I see so much more in terms of, the creative visionary growing and talking to more artists and filmmakers about what they do and why they do it. And kind of coming back to that original thing that really lit my soul on fire, which was people's creative process and talking about creativity, incorporating more video and all of those things. But it's changed everything. It allowed me to make money and be an artist and fit into this world of online business that feels so crazy sometimes.
And I feel like it's almost like the creative dream to just be able to financially support yourself on your creativity. And even more so, like you have your own business helping other creatives, being creatively stimulated. You're not employed by a production company, like you are the company. And for me personally, that's the dream, right? Like to be able to not be stressed between your freelancer TV contracts or theater contracts.
Yeah.
Just have something that's yours that generates money so you could live your life. Like that's just so wonderful that you've been able to do that for yourself.
It's so wonderful. And there's so much to say on that. I mean, I was just working on a documentary, like a long contracted documentary. And I will never stop working on films and making films. So my relationship with my business kind of ebbs and flows, right? But the podcast anchors me in to this offer that I have, these offers that I have. And, you know, there's just been, last year for me was such an interesting transformative year in terms of like, do I fit into this entrepreneurial space? And like, what the heck is going on here? And I have been reading Rick Rubin's book and just really like, so many people are reading it's called The Creative Act. Incredible. And I've just gained so much inspiration and clarity from Rick Rubin's work lately. And he was very clearly spelling out that there is a difference in marketing products and selling products. That is commerce. That is business. Art, you are making from the core of your being for yourself first, which feels a little like, whoa, that's edgy to say, but you're making it from your soul for you, because the only way to make good art is to do that, is to really truly stay true to that. Business and commerce is actually the opposite. It's what are the needs of your audience and how can you fill them? So understanding, it's not to say that you can't make money as an artist. You absolutely can. It's like flipping that on its head. But it's, for me, it was so helpful to understand, like, you can be an artist and make money doing that. You can be an artist and work at a coffee shop. Make your art. Like, just keep making your art. That's the number one thing. If that's the thing that makes you feel alive, then keep doing that. Making money is just how the world goes around. Figure out a way to make money and just stick to it. If you are blessed enough to have them overlap, then amazing. But they don't have to. We like in this entrepreneurial space, it's like, you know, the most aligned thing and anything's possible and make $100 million in 1 month. And it's just like crazy. It's like, let's just come back to the basics of like, am I happy? Am I getting to make my art? And can I pay my bills and support myself? I really like have come back to that a lot. And I know it's a different take in this very kind of buzzy, like entrepreneurial space, but it's just life, man. Like landing that the difference in commerce and art really hit me, because I was like, it takes the pressure off of your art. And Elizabeth Gilbert talks about creativity and art the same way. It's like, don't put the pressure of paying your water bill and your power bill on your art.
Like, you can't create from a place of that, of fear, of pressure.
No. And it's like, you know, again, yes. Can you know, be a podcaster and like that become your mainstream of income? Yes. Can you be a photographer and that's your mainstream of income? Yes. It happens all around us. Yes. Can you be an actor and that's your mainstream of income? Yes. It happens all around us. But on the journey, it doesn't have to. Yeah. Right? Like it doesn't have to. So that feels important.
It is important because like it speaks actually just like genuinely to me for when I hit like a really big part of burnout during the pandemic. And I was so overworked at producing a show. And I was just like, really, when I was working with my coach at the time, and I remember that anything that came to creating for myself that wasn't making me money, the comment in the story that came up was, what's the point? What's the point? And I had to actively work to find my way back into the joy of creating and remembering that it doesn't need to be something that brings me money or or makes me a better human or helps me grow in any way, but just because it's like my heart, it's my soul, it's how I've always shared how I feel. It's my creative out, like it's me, it's my soul. It's what you were saying. It's our heart basically. It's for us, and we have to remember to come back to that. So I do think that message is really important. At least it is for me.
Yeah.
Caroline, you have shared so much great insights, and I've definitely learned from this conversation. If any of our listeners are curious about working with you, where can they find your work and connect with you?
Yes. Well, I just love this conversation so much. And you can find me on my podcast, the Creative Visionary Podcast. It's a great place to really get to know me better and learn, especially if you're interested in podcasting or just navigating the creative process. There's a lot there for you. So Creative Visionary, great resource. And my Instagram, I am Caroline Aylward. I haven't really been that active on it. There's still a lot of great resources linked there. And
Well, Caroline, I will have all of those linked down below. So anyone listening, you don't have to question if you're spelling anything right or where to find her. You just go to the episode description and click the link below. Before I let you go, do you have any final words for anyone listening right now who is feeling the call and considering podcasting?
trust that call. If I hadn't trusted that feeling, that little nudge of like, this is feeling really exciting to me and really good, I would not be here doing this. So let that excitement that's in your belly be enough. Let that be validation enough. Trust yourself that you can do it because you can.
Thank you so much, Caroline. This has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now time for the legal stuff. This podcast is presented to you solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I may be a professionally certified coach myself, but hosting a podcast is not coaching. This podcast should not be used in substitution of working with a licensed therapist, doctor, coach, or other qualified professionals. Copy that? Amazing. See you on the next episode. Nothing but love, Jess.